Okay, so I'm going to start recording and we'll get going. We're going to be on the call for no more than an hour, probably about half an hour worth of presentation, and then into some questions across the programme. So the agenda for tonight, we're going to set the scene, which is quite important, I think, just in terms of what's happened over the past few weeks and months. We're going to touch on the small group guidance that came out late last week. We're going to look at the funding support, so what's happened so far and what's ongoing. We're going to touch on the Surrey Umpires Challenge, which is a project that many of you will know about across Surrey, which has been very successful so far, and just wanted to bring you up to speed on that. We're going to talk briefly about our new appointment of our new Director of Cricket Participation, and then we'll take some questions at the end. Okay, so setting the scene. Obviously, there's been a lot happening in the past few weeks around the game, around the virus, around government, and just wanted to talk through really the scene setting around how ECB are working with government, what the game is trying to achieve during this period to really ensure that we sort of lead the way in terms of sports response to coronavirus. And I've just put that slide up really because it's important to remember that we are still in a pandemic and we have still got a role to play in terms of doing the right thing. And I think it's fair to say that cricket is really leading the way in that, in terms of the sports. So setting the scene, wanted to give a bit of context behind some of ECB's work with government, some of the sort of bit of myth busting around some of the social media content that people might be seeing over recent times, just so everyone understands sort of the flow of information and also the importance that each part has to play in terms of when it gets to us in the recreational game. So from the outset, ECB set 3 principles when they started working on their response to COVID, which number one was protecting public safety. So that was going to come above everything else. Protecting the network, and that is the county boards, the county clubs and cricket clubs, all the way down through to the recreational game and grassroots. And that continues to be very much a major focus of what they're trying to protect during this pandemic. So everyone understands at HQ that without the recreational game and that sort of grassroots network of clubs, the game probably doesn't exist. So it is front and centre of a lot of decision making that goes on. And then the third principle is working in partnership, which ECB continues to do with a number of different partners and organisations. And obviously within that, government's one of them. So ECB have been working very closely with government, and obviously every decision that's made around the easing of lockdown relies on sign off by government. So ECB members of the ECB team are working with DCMS to get sign off on everything that then comes out through to the network. And what they're doing is being seen as a real sort of shining example of good practice at government, or in government at the moment. So the process that ECB are taking is being seen very, very positively by government, and as a result, that's really helping put cricket in a good position as we go together through this test, as I put on the screen here. So on a call we had last Wednesday, the feedback was that cricket's adherence to the guidance and to the expectations from government around lockdown is being noticed, and I think that's really going to help us as we come out of this on the other side, once we get back to playing the game. So the fact that clubs have waited for the guidance, the fact that clubs are taking their time to really understand the guidance and come up with safe protocols to open their clubs is really making a difference, and it's vitally important we continue to do that as we go forward. And I think also within that, ECB and cricket as a game together through this test are really sort of have shown that as a sport we're more than just cricket. And I think if you go in to have a look at the links on together through this test, and if you've seen the video, you'll see that the game has offered so much more to society during this period than just simply playing the game. So I think that's really shone through in terms of the response. And I think that is seen really positively by government, which I think is fantastic. It's also worth noting, I think, that ECB are in an incredibly challenging position because without cricket on television, the Sky contract and the funding that comes into the game through broadcasting is at risk. And I think it's been largely, publicised in the press and through Tom's appearance in front of the Select Committee that the game is currently looking at £100 million loss in a best case scenario. Obviously, some positive signs today in the fact that the West Indies have arrived in the UK and that looks to be moving forward effectively. But getting Test match cricket on television this year, investing that time and effort to make sure that can happen, it is really important because that funding that ECB gains through the broadcasting deals does make its way down to the recreational game. And as you would have seen in response to the pandemic, ECB have taken steps to support the county board network and the club network almost immediately. So £2 million worth of grant aid funding is available to clubs, £18 million worth of loan funding, and counties received advances on their monthly payments that essentially help us to employ our board staff. So the importance of the television deal can't be underestimated in terms of the impact it has on the recreational game. So I think it's important that people understand that across the game, that it is it's not like the Premier League where they're a separate entity. We are all in it together, and getting cricket in front of onto television in just under a month is a key part of making that happen. Professional cricket, there was a release that came out a couple of weeks ago that led to some confusion around the domestic game. So I wanted to just touch upon that. So the domestic game in this country is professional county cricket, and that will hopefully start in August. The recreational game will not necessarily follow that same timescale. So there are the recreational game is currently suspended, but we are moving, as you'll see in a bit, towards preparing to get back to playing at some stage, and that may be before the 1st of August potentially. But it's important to understand that the reason for the August date is twofold. One, most of the counties furloughed players, which means there's a process to go through to get those players back off furlough, and then the pre-season training in terms of strength and condition that's needed for particularly the quick bowlers is 6 to 7 weeks before they can play. So that's why the 1st of August date seems further away than some people may have expected it to be, but there is a good reason for that. So on to the staged return. So hopefully later this week, ECB will be making a further announcement around the roadmap that I think everyone's looking forward to seeing, really, around the next steps for the return to the game. So many other sports have posted these and released these, and ECB are working on a draft as we speak. I suppose the good news about that roadmap is that stage 3 of that roadmap is small group activities, which we're now into. So we're kind of halfway through the roadmap to return to cricket already, which is a good sign. There are 5 stages. The 5th stage will be a full return to cricket, and there'll be a stage in between, which is probably a return to adapted formats. Obviously, don't want to go into too much detail on that right this second because there's more information to follow in the next week or so. But I suppose rest assured there is a plan. We are hoping that if the government direction of travel around the virus continues in terms of infections reducing, in terms of those 5 tests being met, we're hopeful that some meaningful cricket, I think it was referred to last week, may be possible in July. Clearly, it's a changing beast, and it can change sort of on an hourly basis depending on what day it is and what activities are going on in government. But at the moment, I think there's a cautious optimism. I think the phrase was used last week that we will get back into some meaningful cricket later this season. And then finally, on setting the scene, just wanted to touch on the SCF the SCF position, which is we're currently working on a 25% staffing ratio. So 75%, so 12 of the team are on furlough leave at the moment, and that's being reviewed on an ongoing basis. As I said at the start, Chris will be joining us as a new director of cricket participation on the 22nd of June. So we'll be back up to 5, and then that position will be reviewed on an ongoing basis. And we are obviously constantly reviewing where we're at, working with the ECB around our cash flow and so on and so forth. So we're sort of probably steady as she goes would be a good reference point to give there. In terms of getting in touch with us, the best way of doing that at the moment is through the foundation@surreycricket.com email address, because that's everyone has access to that within the team. And then obviously for those of you that have direct links in with Kim, Chevy, Sarah or myself, you're always more than welcome to speak to us, arrange a video call or however you want to communicate. Okay, so just to finish off on talking of ECB planning, so during this process and in terms of that SCF position, in terms of the recreational game, ECB have sort of set this 3-staged approach up. So Protect was phase 1, and that was looking at really protecting ourselves, so looking at making sure that as an organisation we were going to be robust enough to manage through this first period in terms of saving money, financials, the furlough schemes and so on and so forth, and also protecting the network as well. So this is where we've done a lot of work on contacting clubs, trying to make sure that clubs are going to be okay, trying to advise and support and guide towards funding opportunities and so on and so forth. And as you'll see in a bit, we've hopefully assisted a number of clubs to generate or to find significant funding during this period. And as you see, it says we're now between protect and prepare. So we're starting to move into a new phase that was hopefully going to start to enable us to start getting closer to actually playing the game. We'll probably find out more about that over the next couple of weeks. But within the junior league management team, we're going to be discussing what our options may be if we get the go-ahead to play cricket in August, September, and so on and so forth, so we can start to really understand how we can best support the network to get as much cricket played this year as possible. Okay, so I just wanted to touch briefly on small group guidance. I don't want to talk in too much depth because the guidance is very detailed and it came out last week, and hopefully everyone has had a chance to really digest it and look at it. But I wanted to sort of touch upon a couple of key points, I suppose, within that. So first thing is take time to consider the guidance. So there is no rush. It's the 9th of June tonight. We've got over 3.5 months of cricket potentially ahead of us if the weather is kind, if the tracking of the virus is kind. So we have actually got a significant amount of time to potentially deliver cricket activity this summer, and fully understand that we don't know necessarily when we might get back to actual playing matches, but for the time being we've got opportunity to get players out there practicing their skills and getting back into that club environment ready to go. So take time, discuss at committee, understand your environment that you're working in, and build up what your plan is going to be for reopening. I've seen obviously a number of clubs have been able to move from the 1-to-1 through to the 6 pretty quickly. Others are sort of taking a step back and really thinking about it carefully, particularly when it's outside the nets. And then talk about 5 players and how we're going to manage an activity which involves using a ball and how you're going to try and avoid that shared use of balls and that kind of stuff. So take your time to really consider it. Definitely risk assess. So really look at those. I sent an email or 2 this afternoon. Look at what those risks are from within this expansion. Take it slowly. So I've seen a couple of clubs that have gone with a trial activity or a trial session with a couple of age groups just to sort of understand how they're best going to manage these small groups of 5 plus 1 coach during that period. So don't rush to sort of jump out and try and have 100 kids on the ground, because that's going to lead to problems, I would think. So think about it, take your time, risk assess. So look at what you need to do to keep everyone as safe as possible, and then try before you go live with a wider group. And I think it's important to point out that we're now getting to a point where we can really encourage clubs, or clubs can encourage their members to pay their membership fees. So I think I was speaking to a club in Surrey yesterday, and they said that they had a 25% or something like that of their membership pay over a weekend now that they can get out and access small group coaching. So, the game's starting to be able to provide quite a lot of benefit to their members. So it's an opportunity to really ensure that vital membership income can be banked this year. And I think that should be the way that you're thinking and looking now, because like I say, we've got 3.5 months ahead of us, and we can potentially get a lot of cricket in during that period. It may not be the cricket we were expecting to get in, but I think there's still a lot of value you can offer to your members, and therefore, and that membership income no doubt will be vital to your ongoing liquidity over the winter and into next year. And I think we'll come on to liquidity in the funding section, and then the last thing is sharing practice. So we are on a limited staff at the foundation at the moment, but our social media, we're kind of making sure that we're on that, sharing, liking, commenting. So if you're delivering sessions, you come up with great session plans around how to deliver COVID compliant activities for small groups and that kind of stuff, please share them, whether it be emailing it to us so we can share, or whether it's posting it on social media so we can like and comment and retweet, or share on Facebook and stuff, because hundreds of clubs across the country will be going through the same process. So if we can share best practice, it's going to help not have everyone reinvent the wheel. ECB are also looking into this as well. So hopefully I Coach Cricket, which is got a lot of activities on it, will also hopefully in the next week or so have some additional COVID compliant activities that people can copy as well and use as they wish. Okay, so moving on to finance. First of all, we want to say a big thank you. So what we've found during this period is that clubs have really stepped up. The slide here I've got is a slide I used in the first webinar we did, which talks about the fact we need to support the clubs most in need, and that if your club can manage and can get by, now's the time to do it. It's not the time to go after the Sport England funding if you know you're going to be able to safely navigate these tricky times, and that's been very much what we've seen. So thank you very much for clubs that have done that and have been able to just accept that they're going to use some of their reserves and they're going to ride out the storm. We understand and we know that moving into 2021 and beyond, we may need to shift the focus and the emphasis on some of our own grant giving, because clubs that have used up their reserves when they might have been using those reserves in a year's time for a new piece of equipment or machinery or whatever, that may lead to a slightly different challenge in 2021. So we are going to be reviewing our grant giving for the future, to look at how we can make sure that it's not just about getting through 2020 and then going back to business as usual. There'll be an ongoing challenge that we face moving forward. And at the bottom there, every club is important. I think that's really key. And what this has driven us to do is really try and get in touch with every single club within the county boundaries. And I'm about to probably seek your help to try and get to those final dozen or so that are proving hardest to reach, because we want to make sure that every single club has been in touch and that we know their financial position. Okay, so so far we've had 175 responses to our survey, which is really looking at the financial impact of COVID on clubs. Nothing more than that at this point, not looking at the impact of COVID on membership or anything like that. That'll be a separate piece of work, I expect. But we're most interested at the outset in terms of the finance, to make sure that clubs are able to get through this period financially. And there's around 26. It's changeable because each day we're getting new responses, new contacts. But what's become very, very clear during this process is that a huge amount of financial support has come in to support the network. And at the moment that stands at £695,000, and that's a combination really of Sport England funding, of which we've as a county managed to access around 180,000, and then the government retail, leisure, and hospitality grants that have brought in around 500 odd thousand so far, and that's growing every day. And I think what I'd say is, if you filled in the survey weeks and weeks ago and have since found out that you've been a beneficiary of one of these £10,000 grants or £25,000 grants, please let us know, because ECB are recording this information just to really understand, what that overall funding gap might be in the game. But I think it's fair to say there's been a huge amount of finance coming into the game, which is great, often just to replace money that has been lost due to the fact we haven't been able to open. And we know there's still clubs out there that need further support. So there are still opportunities to access the grants from local authorities. We've been speaking to clubs in the last couple of days who didn't realise they may be eligible. So if you haven't applied and you're interested and you want to find out if you might be eligible, then get in touch and we can help you. And then government have also released a new discretionary fund, which is potentially there to support clubs that may not have been eligible for the leisure grant. So in some instances, the leisure grant will always go to the person or the organisation that would be due to pay the rates, the business rates. So if you're a sports club, it's going to be the sports club overall body that would access that money. Sometimes clubs have a landlord that isn't a sports club, and they would access the money. So the discretionary fund is worth considering. Each local authority does it slightly differently. We don't expect a lot of clubs to get support through this fund, but I heard today a club on the Isle of Wight's received £5,000. So it's worth getting in there, and also worth getting in there quite quickly, because some of these pots are opening up and closing within a week or so, apparently. So definitely worth looking at. And then also ECB have a loan and grant scheme that we're supporting them to roll out. So for those clubs that are still at risk, still feeling that they're not going to get through this year, please get in touch, because we can help, and we will help as best we can to make sure that every club is here this time next year. So in terms of the clubs yet to respond, I guess a plea for help from the network, really. So the ones in green have responded in the last day or so, so we now have information and dialogue with those. But if you have contacts at your own club with any of these clubs on the list, we'd love to hear from you and just get a contact at each of these clubs, because the ones we're sending out notes and phone calls and not always getting a response so far. We just want to check in to make sure these clubs are okay. The ones in green are ones that we have heard from, but if you have any contacts, please send them to the foundation inbox, and we can then pick them up and make sure that we touch base with all these clubs over the coming days. And hopefully we'll end up with, I think it's 201 on our list that we've all heard from. They're all going to be okay. So this time next year we've got the same proper clubs that we would have had before. Okay, so on to the Surrey Umpires Challenge. So I suppose it was about a month ago now. We had not a lot going on in the sense that we were probably not really at the point where we could get even to the one-to-one training at this point. So it's kind of full lockdown for cricket, and ECB released some of their online training resources and made them widely free. So I registered myself on the course, and when I registered, I thought wouldn't it be good if the information that was collected included the club, because we could probably make a bit of a competition of it and have a bit of fun, but at the same time probably deliver some really good benefits to the network. And that's where the possibly not that imaginatively named Surrey Umpires Challenge came from. So at the moment, we stand at just over 1,200 people have registered on our own Surrey-specific link for this online Stage 1 course. In addition to that, there's another 200, just under 200 that registered through the national link. So all being well, we will have trained at least 1,400 people at Stage 1 umpire level during this strange period. And I guess the thinking behind it was that it can bring many benefits, really. We don't expect there to be 1,400 new umpires looking to stand on the Surrey Championship panel next year. Not at any point. We expect, hopefully, a few more parents to feel confident enough to offer their services to stand in junior games. We expect there to be a number of adult players that, when it comes to standing in matches because they don't have standing umpires, feeling more confident to do that and having a bit more knowledge and understanding about the laws to help them provide a better playing experience. And we do expect a few of those, as many as possible, I suppose, to want to go on and see that umpiring is a route of interest for them in terms of an ongoing role within the game. So I think there's many benefits there that we see, and we saw the opportunity of a free course, which is actually very interactive and quite easy going in terms of a online course to deliver or to complete yourself. And we saw a route to market to add a bit of competition into it with our social media, and that's what's come out of it. And what's been possibly the most, well, the 1,400 is probably the massive unexpected number and the sort of most pleasurable part about the programme. But then ECB and ACO have identified this is something they want to roll out nationally. So we've now got Essex, Sussex, the Isle of Wight, Berkshire, Cheshire, Yorkshire and Oxfordshire so far all looking at replicating our programme. So really good to see Surrey leading the way on this. And at the moment, until these guys get up and running, we have over 30% of the national training volume in the stage one this year. And this is so yes, Pam, it is still open, just so you know. So I'm going to come on to that in a second. But this is the league table from a couple of days ago. It's now gone over 1,200. This was done, I think, yesterday morning. So we were still getting a really good number of new registrations every day. And I suppose the call to action within this, we've got 37 clubs that have trained at least 10 people on stage one. But there's something like 70 clubs that have trained one person. Bear with me a sec. So I'll come on to sort of our next steps on that in a minute. But what I wanted to do now was to invite Peter Roberts, who's from Whiteley Village, to talk briefly about how they've worked on this programme. And as you'll see, Whiteley Village are currently fifth in our league table with 31 registrations from what is not the biggest club in the county. And I'd just like to ask him to say a few words about how they went about it and what the benefits are that they see coming out of it. So Peter, can I hand over to you?
Yeah, sure. If you can hear me, Simon?
Yeah.
Super. Wasn't when we were looking at this initially, because there was so little we could offer our members, we sort of grabbed this as an opportunity to communicate out, because we were worried we only have around 35 to 40 senior members and 70 colts in total. And so we were looking at how we could promote the idea that there would be some cricket going this summer. And so we sent an email out to everybody. So what we did wasn't rocket science, but then we grouped and targeted different groups that we have within our WhatsApp communities. So we have age group WhatsApp groups, we have a third 11 group, we have a second 11 group, we have a first 11 group, etc. So we gave a slightly different twist to each of those groups to say what they could get out of this. And obviously it appeals differently for different people. But what we've had is a very broad range of people. So a third of the people under 25 have signed up, from 5 of the under 14s through to under 17s. And so we sent it out to all the parents and said, look, because that's where our kind of concern was, we have a lot of parents who don't really understand the laws of cricket and don't really understand what we're trying to help the kids get a grip on. And we said that was your opportunity. But we made a point of saying we would not pester people to stand. This was an opportunity to educate yourself, whether you're a parent, an older colt, or a senior player who's been with us a long time, to clarify the interpretation of the laws, but also give you more confidence that if you wanted to stand, that actually it's pretty straightforward, as long as you follow the logic and what was being provided. And we had a great response. and a large proportion of the guys already talked about the fact that they've completed the course, and I think we're going to see a huge benefit within the club. I'm not sure it's a reflection on whether people don't want to be given out badly by their fellow members, because obviously we play at a level where there aren't many standing umpires. So maybe it's a reflection of that a lot of people do have to stand, and this helps with their confidence. But generally speaking, it just seems a really good opportunity to educate and learn about the laws of the game and participate better and more completely. So it seems to have worked for us, and we just promoted it through the varying different channels, and we also used the league table, which sort of gave us a little bit of a boost, and we went from 6th to 4th or 5th or whatever, and that was just gave us something more to focus on during this period of time when people couldn't actually get out and practice. So I think it's a really good thing, and I think people should promote it more. The more people who understand the laws of the game and the intricacies and the interpretation, the better. Thank you, Simon.
Great, thank you very much, Peter. So that's fantastic, and thanks for giving your time to explain how you've done it. And I've heard also from Old Ruts, and I've heard from Merstham, who are towards that top of that leaderboard, and it is they've just sent emails out to their different groups using the templates that we provided, and that's helped them drive that response, along with a bit of friendly competition in terms of the social media stuff as well. So a good time to answer a couple of questions really on that. So firstly, yes, registrations are still open, so people can still get involved in that, and we are encouraging to do that, and that registration will stay open. And then in terms of numbers of registrations or completed courses, we're very mindful of the fact that so far we've assisted 1,400 people to get a registration onto a course, and we know that we want them to complete that course. So we're going to transition over the next week in terms of our social media side and how we report on this, to start the league tables again based on numbers of completions within those clubs. Obviously within that course information, I can contact all of the registrants and obviously remind them, sort of congratulate them for taking the first step, encouraging them to finish the course, and we'll probably encourage them to send images of their certificates back to their lead person on their club committee, so that can be used within the social media side as well, or on the WhatsApp groups, just to sort of become a little badge of honour to say, well, I finished it, here you go, and it will hopefully encourage other people to do the same. And then finally, we'll probably finish with a bit of a completion percentage rate, so the number of people completed against the number of people registered and what that percentage looks like. Clearly the measurements are a bit of fun as much as anything, but also a good way of just trying to keep the onus and the emphasis on the programme going and just trying to engage as many people as possible. And then, like I said, there to put impact with a question mark, what is the impact going to be? And I think I've touched upon where we think it could be, but actually what's been really heartening is I think about 40% or thereabouts of all of the registrations have agreed to be contacted by the local ACO. So we've started to build the base of our officiating pyramid, and we will be able to hopefully communicate with some of these people to find out what their journeys have been like beyond the course. So it may be that most people don't go on to stand officially, but if we do find that people are finding a route into umpiring in a more formal way through this, then that'll be a great response. And ECB, ACOs, the ambition and the real sort of the vision, I suppose, is that every game has official umpires at some point. So I think it's, at the start of the year, some numbers, some stats came out from ECB, ACO around their ambition and their targets for the next 5 years, and they were huge. The number, and I think a lot of us sort of stepped back and went, wow, that's a big number. But actually, this program has shown that there is an appetite there for people to really understand a bit more about officiating and get involved. I suppose it's also worth noting that we may be looking to do something similar with the introduction to scoring course as well. So keep an eye out for that, because we may be doing something similar in the next say few weeks, next month or so, to try and drive more people into scoring as well. at that point, before I move on, just want to invite Kim to see if she's got anything she'd like to add at this point. Kim?
Not at the moment, Simon, after the next one, if that's okay.
Okay. Perfect. So getting towards the end of the presentation, so as many of you will probably have worked out by now or seen, I think we communicated it back in February. Paul Taylor left, moved on from the role after, I think, 16 years in post. And on the 22nd of June, Chris Coleman will be joining us. I'll send you the link to the story as well. But Chris is was the Director of Community Cricket at Sussex. So he's coming up the A23, M23, although actually he lives in Guildford, so he only comes from there if he was driving from Hove. But he'll join us on the 22nd, and I'm sure we'll hear more from him in due course. Kim?
Hello, yes. Hello all, it's Kim here, and I work with Simon in the Surrey Cricket Foundation. On behalf of the Surrey Cricket Foundation development team, Simon, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you publicly for all you've done within your role as the interim director. You've certainly risen to the occasion and to the challenge, and so thank you and very, very well done. Thanks all.
Thanks, Kim. It's really appreciated. Cool. Almost there. So just wanted to touch base on ongoing communications. I'm sure you've seen these slides before, but just to remind you that we're trying to make sure that everything we send out is on the website. So there's a story that we update on a sort of weekly basis with the latest news, and it's the start of the story will be the latest day that's been referenced there in terms of an announcement or a government piece of information or whatnot. And then we'll use social media to really push that out into the network. So Twitter, Facebook, in particular, are the two that we're really trying to push. And we just encourage you to do as much as you can to spread the word and keep an eye on those feeds and follow and like those feeds so we can see what's happening in the network, and we can obviously come back to you with any questions or queries that you might have. And just it's the quickest way to get a lot of this information out for you at this time. We'll continue with the weekly emails, and there's normally an update of some sort to provide each week, and we'll obviously continue to be here to help you during this period as well. So that just brings us on to questions. So what I'll do is I'll go up through the conversation and answer those as best we can, and then if you've got any further questions that come up during the presentation, obviously type them in now, and then we'll come to them at the end. So I've got Nick with Dynamos. I think Kim answered that one. So hopefully we'll hear more about Dynamos and All Stars over the next few weeks. In terms of grounds being available, we are highly aware that it will become a very complex environment, particularly for clubs that hire local authority pitches. So we have been doing some work with local authorities, excuse me, to fully understand the landscape there. So every local authority is different. Some are still preparing pitches; they're sort of ready to go at a two-week notice period. Some are sort of suggesting that if we get beyond two later time within the summer, they'll have to sort of bypass cricket altogether and move on into football and rugby and that kind of stuff. So yeah, so it is a challenge that we're going to face, and we're going to have to be adaptable, and we're going to have to be innovative. We're going to have to think outside the box. And I think when we get to this roadmap that hopefully comes out in the next few days, that first step on the journey will be about reactivating cricket, and it might not look quite like the cricket we saw before, so it might be short-sided games. Within the junior realms, if we can't get pitches that are prepared, we might have to think about playing softball rather than hardball. But we are going to do what we can to make sure we know as much intelligence as possible around the accessibility of grounds, so that we can maximise playing opportunities in the time we've got. I think, Nick, you might ask another question later down about the senior league. So Championship are meeting as we speak, / met just before this meeting, I believe. they're looking at the options that are open to them around how they may reactivate and get going. I've spoken with the Surrey Cricket League this week. Obviously, the Surrey Slam announced a range of sort of start date options back in May, June time. The Fullers are working closely with the Surrey Championship as well. So everyone that's sort of involved in league cricket is busily trying to make sure that as and when we get the opportunity, there's opportunities there to grab hold of, to play as much cricket as we can, whilst bearing in mind there's going to be lots of people clamouring for activity and space during that period. So we need to just bear in mind that we don't want certain sections within a club, whether it be the under-15s taking over all the under-11s pitch slots, or whether it's at senior cricket playing every day of the week and stopping junior cricket being able to be played. We need to be mindful, and clubs need to work internally to make sure that they're facilitating the needs of all their members during that period. But I think everyone, and I've had a few conversations with various people about this, but every single person on this call at ECB within the county game are all working towards the same goal, which is to play cricket and play as much of it as we can, as long as it's safe to do so. So Pam, we answered your question about new participants. Definitely, thanks to Caroline. She's been driving Old Ruts's response there, and they passed 50 registrations, I think, earlier in the week. Thanks again to Peter. To Caroline's question with women, I mean, at the moment, the focus has just been on trying to get as many people, male or female, on the stage one within the ACO plan that were kind of parked a little bit during this period, but working with Dave Walter, who's the chairman of the ACO, on women and girls as a key strand of that 5-year plan to try and develop the umpiring pathway alongside the playing pathway, which obviously has seen such significant growth. So it is on the agenda, but it's obviously those strategies have been parked temporarily whilst we're going through the COVID times that we've got. So Pam, All Stars and Dynamos, I think Kim answered that a bit further up. That so if you go up into the chain here, we've got we're hopeful they'll still take place. However, if people are looking for refunds, you can direct them to the help desk. But I think we're hopeful, cautiously optimistic that something like All Stars is probably deliverable, given every player gets a kit bag. Every player gets a kit bag, which means they've got their own bat, they've got their own ball. So I can see a world where an activator organises activities where a parent or guardian and their child are working together through the session, for example. So, the junior competition stuff. So, cautious, optimistic of being able to play some meaningful cricket in July. I think, without wanting to go into too much detail on that, John, I think the challenges we might face with going back to 11-a-side cricket in the short term are around government's sizes of gatherings that are permitted. I can see I think Paul might be on the call from ECB. So give me a second, I'll see if I can make him a presenter if he wants to add anything. And then Aidan, is there any feedback from the Premier League? I think that the feedback from the Premier League call was similar to what we've gone over, really, that we are looking cautiously optimistic, but at the moment we're waiting for this roadmap to be released, which might be later in the week. Paul Bedford, do you want to add anything at that point, just with your ECB hat on? Possibly not. Okay, it might not be on. Right. Okay. So so Caroline spoke about that earlier. So hopefully we'll encourage that sharing of information, and the email that follows up will just encourage people to do that. So if people are running activities in a COVID compliant way in terms of fielding, batting, bowling in small groups, then please do let us know so we can share that. Similar response to your question there, Jim. I suppose that we are. I suppose waiting for ECB to see if they've got some ideas on that, but also for those clubs that are going out and starting to do it, it's about trying to share that information. I've had some plans through from Whitgift School through Neil Kendrick, so I'll probably message him and see if he wouldn't mind me sharing that. So they've looked at how they're going to manage that ball contact and that kind of stuff. So bear with me on that one. I'll go back to Neil in the next day or two. Do you have any advice other than running individual club risks for junior training? I think at this stage, Richard, we're in a very different world, and I think that's the thing that has to sort of drive some of these activities. So, I've seen some clubs promoting, and this is not in Surrey, but back to junior cricket sort of message, where it's not really back to junior cricket. There are a number of challenges, particularly with kit and balls that we face. So I think that's where it's got to start. So if you take the ECB guidance as the Bible and work backwards from there. So if there's no sharing of equipment, clearly if all your players don't have equipment for hardball cricket, you're going to have to then think about how you can manage softball cricket. Within the net environment, you might have some that have all of the equipment and some that have none. So hopefully transitioning between using a hardball for those that have the full protective equipment to a softer ball when those that don't have it, assuming you've got access to enough balls, or the children have access to enough balls so they're not sharing, might be a solution as an example. Nick, I think ECB feel that reinitiating junior cricket is probably going to happen before senior cricket. I think there's also an understanding that junior cricket quite often helps subsidise the cost of senior cricket. So in terms of club revenues, most clubs will have significantly more juniors than they do seniors. So the revenue from junior cricket far outweighs senior cricket. So I think, and I think things like All Stars, where they can go back to activity potentially in a fairly reasonable way, without it affecting the programme too much, sort of puts junior cricket slightly ahead of senior cricket in some ways potentially. But I think in an ideal world, we want to get everyone back to cricket, because I think we know that there'll be a number of players within adult cricket that are desperate to get back. We also know there'll be a number of adult players that are kind of not so sure they're too bothered now, because it's early June and we need to work hard within the network back in the clubs to try and get those guys and girls back into playing before we lose them to other sports. So I think there's a sort of rounded vision on it. I think let's see what the ECB present this week around the roadmap. But I think it's probably fair to say that next step isn't going to be back to full 11-a-side cricket. The travel, non-essential travel, is still not recommended. So I think travelling across the county to play games of cricket is not something that's going to be happening in the next month or so. Will it happen in August, possibly into September? Who knows? And we know that there's challenges as we get into September, October around ground shares and other sports and that kind of stuff. Cool. So we will work on that. Cool. So Paul, do you want to try now, Bedders? Paul, are you there? Okay, can't get Paul's audio to work by the looks of it. So Paul put here at the bottom there, you see, to get 11-a-side league cricket on clubs, we'll have to move through the adaptive play phase first. So that's this next stage of shorter-sided games, shorter formats, and that kind of stuff. How are coach-to-player ratios to be worked with groups of 5? So the advice I've been given so far, Jim, is if a coach is working in a net environment, obviously they'll work with one group of 5 only, just like one coach per net, as per normal guidance. If they're on the outfield, I think it's feasible and safe for a coach to work with another DBS checked adult team manager and to work with 2 groups of 5. Obviously, those groups are going to work independently, so one adult takes the one group and the coach takes the other, but the coach can then lead that session much in the way they would if they had 24 on the outfield and 2 helpers. So I think that's feasible, but what I've said to a lot of people is build up slowly on that front. So don't go into having 100 people on your ground or 70 people on your ground yet. Just build it up gradually, because all of this is only allowable if it safeguards social distancing and makes sure that we're, as a game, doing the right thing. And I think you've got to also think about parents arriving at the ground, access in and out of the ground, and how you're going to manage that situation as well. So it's quite a complicated piece to get right. Okay, so sorry, I got Aidan here. Most clubs we have to be friendlies. Yeah, so I think, Aidan, once we know the roadmap and the detail behind that, particularly around the timings, which is the hard bit within all of this pandemic situation, we've got many different people sat there waiting, ready to go in terms of activating cricket. So we've got the junior championship. Phil, who's been doing the IT systems, been working on different solutions to how we might generate fixtures, for example. So people are constantly thinking about how we're going to reactivate this once we get going. I know the championship have got some really good ideas. We know that when we get into this phase, there's going to be lots of work to be done, and comms is going to be really important to make sure that we can connect clubs together, particularly those clubs that are going to lose grounds and those that will still have grounds, to make sure that we can make the most out of whatever activity there is we can deliver during that period. So I think we'll leave it there. There's no more questions. If anyone's got any further questions, type them now or forever hold your peace, or just email us at foundation@surreycricket.com. I will get this recording downloaded and sent out via a YouTube link later on today. It'll also go on the website. If you have any further questions or queries, we're all here to help and to support, and hopefully you've felt that support during the last couple of months. I suppose the last thing probably from me is to thank my team during this period as well, because we've all been in it together, worked really well, and to thank all of you guys for everything you're doing to make sure this game is here to be played in the future. Just before I go, Kim, anything to add?
No, thank you, Simon. That's it. Great. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Everyone take care and stay in touch.